Let's take a look at this draw conclusion question, which provides us with information which we must interpret with our own knowledge in order to arrive at a conclusion that we must explain. So, at various times, algae have been classified in different kingdoms. Using the information given above, draw a conclusion about which kingdom is the most appropriate in which to classify algae. In your answer, explain why other kingdoms are not appropriate choices. We have been given information about an algal cell. We must use it in our answer. Now, because this question is an explain why question, we are going to have to draw upon our own knowledge, particularly because we need to explain why other kingdoms are not appropriate choices. We are not just picking the correct one and then saying why. We have to justify effectively why we think the others are not appropriate choices. So justify is a component here, even though it's not explicitly stated. So it's worth remembering what the different kingdoms are that we're going to have to consider. We have the Animalia, the Plantae, fungi, Protoctista, Prokaryota, Eubacteria, and Archaeobacteria. The first thing I'd want to do when classifying an organism based on its cellular structure is identify whether or not it's a eukaryotic cell or a prokaryotic cell. So I need to look for a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. In this case, the nucleus is nice and obvious to see here, which allows me to eliminate the Prokaryota and the Eubacteria and Archaeobacteria immediately because they are prokaryotic cells. Cellular structures worth setting aside straight away as not being particularly useful are the cytoplasm, the mitochondria, and contractile vacuole. Having identified that the cell is eukaryotic, well, cytoplasm will be present in all of those, as will mitochondria. Contractile vacuoles will only be present in some of these kingdoms, but we are not expected to know what this is, and so it's not particularly useful beyond it being a vacuole, which might allow us to perhaps lean towards it being a plant, for example. So let's instead look at more useful organelles, specifically the cell wall and the chloroplast. Now, the chloroplast they have identified and labelled for us, giving internal structures which are not relevant, as well as a cell wall, which, to be unambiguous, they have specifically told us is made of cellulose. Now, the presence of a cellulose cell wall and chloroplast eliminates both the Animalia and fungi. The next piece of information we should turn to, having eliminated all of the cell structures in our reasoning, is the information provided in the stimulus of the question. Many algal species are unicellular organisms. Some occur in colonies of more than one cell. If you do not consider this small piece of information, you may immediately jump to thinking it's plants, a plant cell, because it has many familiar features. However, plants are multicellular organisms, and to try and throw you off, they've said they live in colonies of more than one cell to make it sound like they're multicellular, but it's not the same meaning. A colony is a collection of single-celled organisms. And so, with this potentially obscure fact, we are able to eliminate the Plantae kingdom. So let's talk through how we would structure our answer. First off, we would say it has a nucleus, so it is a eukaryotic organism, has a chloroplast and a cellulose cell wall, so it is not an animal or a fungi. It is unicellular, so not a plant, therefore it is a Protoctista. You can be even more explicit, and you could add alongside each point which kingdoms that eliminates, but we are providing our explanation of why the other kingdoms are not appropriate choices by effectively laying out our logic that brings us to our final conclusion. So when you are presented with a question which requires you to use information in order to arrive at a conclusion, make sure you work through the diagram and eliminate the possibilities step by step, but most importantly, don't forget to address relevant information in the stimulus of the question.